Our next session is with Ralph JOCHAM. Ralph, are you here?
You are muted, Ralph.
Oh, I thought I'm muted.
Thanks. I've been using Zoom so much, but this is kind of a thing I always get wrong the first time. Thanks for introducing me. And actually, you pronounced my name really correctly. That's really appreciated.
Sometimes you have a lot of luck.
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, just to introduce you, okay, to the audience, Ralph is going to talk about, as you see in the agenda, product owner demystified. That's very, very interesting. Okay, just a quick introducing of Ralph. Okay, so Ralph is a change agent, author, and a Scrum.org trainer. Authors the best-selling book about product ownership, The Professional Product Owner. That's very, very cool. So, Ralph, you have the wheels. If you need me, I'm here with you.
Okay, good to know. Thanks. Okay, so let me get started with my presentation. Okay, can you see my slides?
Not yet.
Okay, not yet.
Not yet. Do you share it? Or it's
hang on. Yeah, yeah. Me and Zoom. I think I should share my screen. There you go. And now I do it again.
Now we can see it.
And let me just launch the presentation. Here we go. I think now you should all see that. Okay. So, welcome. Thanks for staying so late. Some people probably have been listening and learning up until late this morning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about product ownership and things which I have found out which are really, really important to become and be a successful product owner. But first, let's do a step back and let's look at, hang on for a second. Let's look at disruption. And there's this great book from Thomas Friedman, Thank You for Being Late. And in his book, he talks about something which is interesting. I think he talks about the longbow. The longbow has been the weapon of choice to kill some enemies from a long distance for a couple of 100 years. So there was really no advancement for a long, long time. And then now, if you just look at tanks and aircraft over the last 100 years, there's a huge change. It's very impressive. And we talk about disruption a lot these days. And if you look at all the different industries and how they expect to be disrupted in the next 12 months, it's fairly high. Now I'm wondering a little bit, why do we actually call it disruption? I mean, you only call something disruptive if you are negatively impacted by it. But on the other hand, we have all those cool toys now, there are all those new technologies. So why don't we call it enablement? And I think this is really depending on which side of the coin you're on. Are you the one who is enabled by new technology, leveraging it, disrupting the others, or are you negatively impacted by it, disrupted? There's another great book out there, Project to Product from Mick Kirsten. And he talks about the 4 different revolutions we had in our industry, kind of. So we had the industrial revolutions in the 17th century. So you have always the installation period, and then you have the turning point. That's basically when the new things which have been developed, leveraged, get implemented, become mainstream essentially. And then you always have a leap afterwards, something positive. But you now look at also in the Great British Leap, for example, there were some companies, enterprises doing really, really well, and many not, because they were disrupted. The same thing repeated then with the age of steam and railways, heavy engineering, oil and mass production. Now we're currently in this layer here, the age of software and digital. And probably started somewhere in the 70s with the first transistors being developed. Now the question is, when did the turning point start? Now some people say 2000, some people say 2007. That's the year when the iPhone came out, the Kindle, Tesla, so many other technologies kind of suddenly appeared. For me, it doesn't really matter. Because the other thing is that at some point, this turning point is going to be over, and it's been a really long one compared to the other ones we had. So whenever the turning point has finished, and the majority of people think at least they use the new technology, we will enter the deployment period. And at this point, the dice have been cast, meaning there will be some companies doing really, really well and many who don't. And that's kind of the thing we're looking at into. And this is kind of, for me, also the thing why proper product ownership, understanding of value is so important these days. Now, looking at the principles. So I broke down it into a couple of principles I've discovered. And the first one is think in products, not in projects. Now, just to lead you a little bit in this thought, could you deliver all your projects as a company on scope, on time, on budget, and still fail as a company? And the sad answer is still yes. Because if you build the wrong thing, if you use the wrong technology, you might still fail in the long run. Now, the interesting thing is now last November, Scrum turned 25. Over 25 years ago, when Ken and Jeff came up with Scrum, they introduced the role of a product owner, not a project owner. They had then actually already realized how important the idea of a product is. And we are surrounded by products. If you just think about how many products you used already this day, you got out of a bed, which is a product. You brushed your teeth, toothpaste, toothbrush, product. You cooked some coffee, product. And essentially, we are surrounded by products. And wherever you see, you probably look, you can see products. And products are enabled by technology. But it's the products which are disrupting, not the technology. So in order to be enabled to build good products, you have to really understand and be in control of the technology you're using right now, and also the technology you will be using in the future. Now, the interesting thing is also that it's easier for a technology company to gather domain knowledge than for a domain company build up technical excellence. So what's holding Apple back from becoming a bank? They have the money, they have a payment system, they have a credit card. It's probably just monopoly laws and things like that. So that's also something I think also leads back to this being disrupted, because so many companies, they're already so much heavily struggling with their legacy systems because they always looked at fast, but they didn't really understand how important it is to build your products on a solid technical foundation. Now, if you say think in products and not in projects, then the next question which arises is, what is a product? And in our book, Don and I, we talk about kind of simple definition, I guess, but we say every product has a producer and a consumer. So somebody who builds something and somebody who leverages, uses that product. And this consumer is either willing to pay for the product or they get a cost benefit by using the product. If it's an internal product, it's something you don't really sell on the market. And it solves a problem for the consumer. Now think about it, the coffee you made this morning, it solved a problem. It woke you up, made you ready to go into the conference and stay awake for some time. Just as a quick side note here, I just recently released, because of the update of the Scrum Guide, I recently released a product goal canvas, which there's a link on the PDF, but you can also just go to my website and get it from there. Now, this was principle 1. Now let's look into principle 2. How do you identify the right product? Now, if you look at a classical organization hierarchy, you often see something like that. And then they say, hey, we are doing Scrum. We have a product backlog for each one of those areas. And we actually also have a product owner in one of these areas. We're really kind of going for Scrum. But now something big comes into the organization, and then it's being broken down. They do this, maybe they plan something, then they pass it over, they do something else with it, they do something else with it, they do something else with it. Well, unluckily, they have nothing to do, and they also do something. Now, this breaking it down, this decomposition we have here, leads to a project mindset, because now all those dependencies you have to manage. And for this, we use basically all our milestones in our sequential life cycle. And all of this also leads to unnecessarily dependence management and coordination. Many handoffs, which result in information scatter and high inventory. Too much focus on efficiencies in this whole process, because people, now think about it, they have nothing to do for a long time. But they have to do also, they have to be busy, so they probably work on low value features first. And all of this leads to an opaque measure of progress, which also maybe causes the invention of work, because these guys have nothing to do. Now they're in a really tough place. They have to justify their existence. So they probably just invent something they need to do. And all of this leads to a loss of customer and a whole product focus. And the important word here is whole product focus. Cost of delay, because now things get delayed and pushed back, and all of that results in less value. And that gets even more amplified because now the next initiative comes into the company and we break it in and then put it on, and the next one, and so on. And because of all those interdependencies, because I would then ask you, hey, why didn't you deliver that? Well, I would have if they would have delivered, and I would have if they had. So everybody blames everyone. This is when the blaming game essentially starts. And often the answer is, yeah, we do Scrum, it doesn't work. And it really boils back to the problem that you haven't defined the right product. So maybe some of you drove, just an explanation, an example. Maybe some of you drove a car today. Now these days, steering wheels have buttons on them to initiate phone calls, adjust the volume, and do other things. I don't think that any one of you bought a button which is on your steering wheel. But a button is a product. It has a producer, a consumer. You get a benefit by using it, and it solves a problem. So now let's look at the steering wheel. Well, the steering wheel also is a product if you think about it. It solves a problem. You can drive left or right. You can push the buttons to do a phone call, adjust the volume, and do other things. Now, sometimes when I ask any one of you bought a steering wheel on its own, I get a hand. It's kind of a tinkerer having an old time or something like that. But normally also not. Even though the button and the steering wheels are perfect products, it's out of the wrong perspective. The right perspective, the right level of abstraction, say a car. Because a car is really what solves a problem for you, transport. So the thing is that essentially you have to really identify what is a meaningful value stream for your end user. Because all of these elements we have here, this is what your customer, your user actually uses. And I've often been to financial institutions, coaching, consulting there, and they have like small technical things and they call it the product. And going back to this example, button steering wheel, yes, it's a product. But this is just a small piece again in this value stream, causing all those interdependency managements, all of those 10 problems we had down here. Now, essentially, the way I think about it, everything which you consider to be a product should have a real final end user on there. And probably it's the person paying you for the service. Now, follow the money. That's, you purchase a car, not a steering wheel. Really, what solves? And if you think about that, you don't have so many products suddenly in the organization anymore. Now, instead of 200, you maybe have 15. So now look, going back to this value stream. So you have to identify your value stream. You have to identify who is this user at the very end handing you the money. for using your product or buying it. And then you put all of this here together. And again, a really simple rule in Scrum: for one product, we have one product owner and one product backlog. Now, in this case, you might have several developers, teams of developers working on that. So each one of those smaller circle in here would be a team of developers, and each one of those dots would represent a active developer. Now, the beautiful is now we have this whole value stream mapped into this bigger product circle. Now, this product is independent. It stands on its own feet. So whenever something happens, maybe a bug is discovered, a need for a new feature, they can just implement it. And as long as they can say, hey, we are done, no worries, we can make a new release. This is how you bring up your release frequency, by decoupling and isolating independent products. Now, it's not as straightforward, because then you have the other product and the other one, and you will see those intersections here. This does not mean, important, this does not mean that there is one team working for two products. This means that those two products, they share a underlying technology. It could be a database, a CMS system, ERP, or something like that. And now this has to be managed somehow. Now, let's say the yellow product wants to make a change in this shared component here. So I would expect, going back to the Agile manifest, to individuals and interactions over processes, they just go over there and they talk to each other. Hey, we want to make this change. How can we make sure? So the way I think about it is, you can play with the other one's toys. You can even improve on them. You must not break them at all. And then the yellow team says, hey, we made all those changes. Our product is still working. How are you doing? And maybe the red product says, yeah, all good. Great. Let's ship it. Maybe the red product says, no, something broke. So they would make a rollback. They would sit down again, talk about it until the check mark is there as well. The same thing would be here and here. Now in the center, this is what I like to call the ground jewels. Everyone is depending on it. That's often a crucial system for the organization. That thing must never break. So essentially the idea is you have to build a fence around that. And what's the easiest answer as a fence? Oh, let's make a component team which takes care of this component. Well, and if they take care of this component, they have to have a product backlog where all the component change requests are being put into. Which essentially means you kind of have probably less than we have up here, but you would still have a component team. And a component team is always a bottleneck, always. Now, essentially, the question is, how can we lower the fence we build around this shared component? Maybe you have to start off like that. That's okay. But you have to think about, how can we lower that fence to make it more accessible for other ones? Maybe you could write a sandbox where development could take place, and then they do all the work. They give it to the team, to the component team. They would watch it, check it out, and finally check it in. Or maybe at some point you do the development. They give you a code review, and if everything is okay, you can check it in. So basically, step by step, you can lower it. And again, we have the technology for this is available. But now the question is, are you as an enterprise capable of using those technologies to build up the internal capabilities you need, or aren't you? Because if not, the chances of being disrupted are probably fairly high. Okay, so we want to get out of this component thinking into real product thinking. Another way I like to explain it is that, let's say here you would have a widget that would be the button on your steering wheel. Then here you would have the steering wheel itself, here the car. Yeah, a really, really large product. I mean, Tesla bought the plant in Fremont, California from Toyota. If you think about it, the plant is also a product in that regard. But don't overshoot it, don't go too far. And then you could put in a coordinate system with a diagonal, and you can just say, well, if you think about a product, well, that's something we could build with Scrum. If it's a large product, that's what we would set up with a scaled Scrum approach, like Less or Nexus. But what is this here? How would we call that? Being busy, doing work? Because what I also think is that the further we can move out on the diagonal, on this light green line here, the higher your degree of validation is. Because building right buttons is probably required to be successful. It doesn't make you successful. Having a good steering wheel, even better, doesn't make you necessarily successful. No, but having a real good car, that makes you successful. So the further out you can move, you're more likely about having the right validation, the right information to make further decisions, and hopefully be successful in the long run. Or look at this 2x2 here, where we say, okay, we have here the different, how many products we have, how many teams of developers, one, more than one, and also here, more than one. So at the bottom left, that's classical Scrum. No secrets there anymore. Product backlog, refinement, sprint, product. The top left, that's where we have scaled Scrum. I mentioned Nexus or less or something like that. So we would have a bigger product backlog. We would have several teams of developers working out of that. And again, one increment at the end. At the top right, this is where your portfolio as an organization is living. This is where you put in your ideas. And one of the things which is really important, and maybe this goes back to what Linda talked before about, it's having this purpose, what you do. Because if you really get something, this is really important for us. Could you build that product? Could you enhance that product? That provides you guidance. And we also know that as a team, you should only work on one thing at a time. Essentially, elements out of this portfolio, which probably also should get refined, you can take them out and then put them into a classical Scrum setup or in a scaled, maybe let's say Nexus setup. And they should finish it before moving on to the next one out of the portfolio. Now, if there's something in the portfolio which is much more important, and this is where you basically look at cost of delay, say, well, but we need this. And if we delay this, and if the cost of delay of not doing the thing in the portfolio is higher, the anticipated value you would make with that one here or that one here, you take it out, you bring it on, maybe you put it back on the portfolio and look at later on at it. But again, you take it out and you work on it until you finish it before you take out the next one. So you also have to prioritize your portfolio. If everything is important, nothing is. Now at the bottom right, I like to paint this because this is the area of pain or death. Because now you have one team working on several products at the same time. Okay. And that's not good because they don't have focus. You will not get commitment. They will not see the purpose in what they do. They get frustrated and so on and so on. So essentially, and the way you can think about that is that this is kind of Scrum. This is the scale Scrum. And this one here is kind of the thread area here. And you want to move out of that. So essentially, the takeaway here is scale your product, not your Scrum. Just throwing more teams at a problem doesn't make it successful. You have to really first identify what is your product. What is your purpose? Which problems are we going to solve for whom? In which way? And these are the questions you should answer before you actually start off on the journey. Sure, there will be changes along the way, but that's important. Now let's look at principle 3. I call it the product management onion, and you have different layers on there. I think every company these days has a vision. I hope so. Based on that, they derive their business strategy. Now, in the context of Scrum, we know how to do our daily planning, sprint planning, release planning. Now, in between here, you have this gap. And in our book, Don and I, we call it the product management vacuum. And maybe you remember from your physics class, a vacuum has this strong inert need to fill itself. And if you're not careful, it fills itself with milestones, charters, reports, time scope, budget planning, and so on. But essentially, this is project mindset because we assess ourselves with how well are we in relation to our plan. Are we still on plan? Are we following the plan? That's wrong. So what we actually need is, based on the business strategy we have to come up with a product vision, maybe for a new product, maybe for a next version of the existing product. And then once we have that, we can come up with a strategy about how we can try to realize it on that. And then we think about releases, sprints, daily plan, and so on. And essentially, as a product owner, you should be anchored high enough here, because if you haven't really understood the vision of the company, the strategy they're following, the purpose for everything you're going to help them, you just become a blind executioner because you get the document handed over and you will just follow the plan. And if the outcome is wrong, you would blame it on them, saying, "Yeah, this is what you gave me. It's not my fault." Now, on the other hand, if you engage this product owner, say, "Hey, this is what we want. These are the problems we want to fix. This is what we see happening. Please do something about that." You can think about it. You can come up with an idea, a vision for that product, the purpose, and then think about how we could do this first for this market and maybe try this one out over there in that country or something else. And then you pass it down to the team of developers. And again, it's the same problem because they have to have understood what you want. Essentially, you have to work out together a good sprint goal, because that's the next focal point you have, the sprint goal. And if they don't get the chance to ask the question, is this important? Why could we also do it this way and that way? This is how they understand it, and then they can act on it autonomously, which Evelyn talked about really early this morning. So essentially, the way I think about it is that product ownership is the amalgamation between what the company wants and the people doing that. An amalgamation means basically you bring two materials together without having any interface in between. If you try for that, you will kind of have to lose the least amount of information and therefore also the least amount of quality. So it's all about vision, value, validation. So vision is that living up here into the product, and we think about what's the best probably outcome we can create for our users, for our customers. And then down here, we ship and validate whether we are right or wrong, and we can learn from that. And then basically we establish a bigger empirical feedback loop. And that's what we call the 3 V's. And that's essentially what product ownership means. Let's look at it in a slightly different angle. Sometimes people come to me, "Hey, Ralph, I'm a product owner." I say, "Great, let's talk." And then they tell me, "You know what? I got a thick binder of requirements and I'm typing them into Jira." I said, "Yeah, you're a product owner, but you are a scribe. You're really good at typing fast a lot." Now, the next level up would be a proxy. So you would go to the customer, ask them what they want. You would write everything down quickly and then go to the you would go from the customer to the developers and tell them what the customer wants. They would ask questions, and probably earlier than later, you would say, "Ah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer, but I'll find it out." You run forward and backward, and it makes you a proxy product owner. Now we have an important line here, because this line now basically becomes more as a game changer in that regard, because now you would have something who is a business representative, somebody who really understands the domain the product is being used in. I always say, if I would do a medical product, I would like to be my product owner to be a nurse or a doctor. Once we were doing a new loan platform at the bank, brilliant product owner, 30 years of loan experience for private persons, for companies, and so on. But sometimes he said, instead of doing this, I'd rather do that. I'd rather spend less money here, more over here. But he couldn't shift it all around because he was not the sponsor. So the next step would be, yes, you are also in charge of the budget. Maybe not how much you get, but how you use it. Again, with the idea to maximize value. And then there's one step further, entrepreneur. So what we like to see in our product owner is not just an executioner, make that happen. It's more like, hey, think outside the box. Entrepreneurial mindset. And sometimes people tell me, "Yeah, Ralph, I can't be an entrepreneur. I work for a large corporation. I'm just kind of somewhere in the middle." I say, I understand. On the other hand, you could still think and act like an entrepreneur. You could find out who are your users, build a network, good relationship with them, and try to leverage all of that to maximize the value in what you are doing. Now, if you really think about that, here on the left-hand side, you don't even justify your name as product owner because you don't own anything. You're being told what to do. You receive. Now, on the other hand, on the right-hand side, you can really drive the product and you can initiate it. And that puts you in charge as product owner. Now let's look at the fourth principle. Now let's say up here is your product vision, then you have your strategy, then you think about value, and then you do delivery and validation. And again, this is kind of what we often see as a product owner. Somebody tells them, you do this, make it happen. But this causes many, many problems. What we really need is this. A thin slice through all those layers. Because what we have over here, maybe we have someone here, a product manager, or someone else says, this is what I want. Make it happen. Now, this causes the problem about this vacuum in between again, because this product manager, whatever this person is, does not understand the challenges or the need for specific, well thought through implemented technologies. He will not appreciate that. And down here, they will not understand what is really wanted. They would just say, give me something to implement. You essentially re-establish the vacuum. Now, if you have this slice through all those layers, and that's, again, product ownership, this is how you fill the vacuum. You understand the vision, you think about the strategy, you work closely together with the people doing the work, and as the product is being released, used, you get the numbers, you can be data informed to make the next decisions. So this is not what we want the right-hand side, the right parameter. So for us, a product owner is an entrepreneur, maybe you call him a product manager, who thinks and acts agile with this entrepreneurial mindset. A product owner provides the purpose, engages and delegates the responsibility to the team. However, you can delegate. By doing this, you delegate responsibility. On the other hand, you always stay accountable for your product because you are the product owner. So I think for me, really, the bottom line here, it's all about the vacuum. Stupid. Now let's drill a little bit further into the 3 V's, which we talked about in the beginning. Vision, value, validation. So vision is really important, but far too often I see visions like this one here or this one over here, and I'm not going to read them out because they are both crap, essentially. Excuse my language here. Sometimes in my trainings, I ask them which one is better, and they look at it and say, I think the left. Oh, no, they're right. I just say, no, they're both useless. They are long, convoluted, abstract sentences. That's not sticky. Our brain doesn't remember that. And there's a really great exercise, and it's called the Summer Meadows exercise. So I give half of the room, the thing here on the left side, and I give half of the room, this one here, what we just have here on the right-hand side. And then I tell them, now make it happen. Okay. Now what happens what the results often looks like, this is what the people do, what the requirements, let's call them, on the left-hand side. They draw everything, it's there, they count the petals, they count the make the color, they even divide and conquer. Some people run away with Post-its because it's faster, and then they stick it on there. I say, hey, well done, team. We checked up everything, all the requirements, on time, on scope, on budget, let's put it this way. Now on the right-hand side, we get something like this. Looks very, very different. And the funny thing is they always come to me and ask me, is this you? If we go back here, draw a beautiful summer meadow with grass, blue, red flowers, and so a couple of birds and cows. This scene reminds our customer of their childhood growing up on a farm. And they would come to me, is this you? Do we do this for you? And I say, yeah, it is. And then they ask me, do you want a chimney? Do you want to have smoke coming out of the chimney? Kind of all these kind of things. And there's already this engagement happening, which is important. So where do you suppose these guys are coming from? That's classical requirements. Well, this is purpose. And then also look about how people will get gauged. This really ties nice with the talk of Linda before. Your success will be measured by how closely you match the specs. Okay, let's really go through that. Let's make sure everything. And here your success will be measured by how happy your customer is with it. That's a customer focus. Solves a problem. So what do you do differently next time? Take that thought. Maybe do the Summer Meadows exercise back at your company next time you start something. So Vision, yeah, create and share your product vision over and over again, and like to share it in the sprint review. And if people say, oh no, not the vision, please, not again, you just say it about often enough. Because if the vision is not in everybody's head working on that, they'll just do something. And only people who have understood the vision can act upon it. And I like to call it shared alignment, shared mental alignment, or the big picture that all the different streams coming together can point towards the right direction. And this is the purpose. Now let's look into value. Now, if we work in a classical waterfall approach, we plan everything, we analyze everything, we design everything, we implement everything, we test everything, and then release everything. This is our waterfall. Because at the very end, that's how we release it. This is when we have our product. But there's always the question mark. Because this is, until then, you don't know if you are doing the right thing, if you're on the right track. You hope so. Because all of that in between here, that's your vacuum again. That's when you follow the plan. Oh, we designed, we are on time. Yeah, if you have 3 months to draw boxes and lines, you are done after 3 months to draw boxes and lines, because can anyone tell you that the design is good or bad? No, because it hasn't been implemented yet. It hasn't been put to the test. This is the test, and this is the only test which counts. But again, these are then the milestones we follow, and we hand it over, and we pat our backs. Good job, well done. But if you look at the value curve, it looks something like that. So there's really no value at all until the very end. And if on all the work we do here costs us something, that's not for free. So you work, you pay. And if you're lucky, you go all the way up. And by doing this, this orange line is going to come up. And once this dashed orange line crashes above, crosses into this area here, you have return on investment, you have positive cash flow. Now, if this thing was a dead on arrival, this won't happen. You just burned and lost money. If this happens too many times, you know what happens as a company. Now in Scrum, the good news is that we are not driven by phases, we are driven by customer focus value. So we would ask our people, customers, hey, of all the things you want, which one is the first important one? Shall we do this first? Okay, let's count. We do this in the first sprint, then we do the next, then we do the next. And then you get a value curve which looks something like that. Sometimes people tell me at the end and starting and endpoint are the same. Yes, you're right. But there's an interesting, because the red line is always trying to catch up with the black line, whereas the green line is always above. And there's an interesting point, because about somewhere here, this is when the distance between the green line and the diagonal is the most. Mathematically seen, this means that on the right-hand side here, your slope is less than 1. And that means you have higher costs running a sprint than the anticipated return on investment. Maybe we should ask ourselves the question at this point, hey, why are we still doing that? And if you're really done, releasable, what probably a very good time to make a release here, collect feedback, and then go back to the product and implement the next features on it, instead of just still following your plan. And again, this is not for free. Now you also pay, but if you do this and you make a release and it's a right release, yeah, you go up. And while this release is kind of already being sold, making money for you, you can start on the next one. If you now would add up all the green areas we have here, that's much more cash flow. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, if you compare this kind of over visibility, ability to change, value and risk, visibility is like that in your waterfall approach. Ability to change decreases if you realize something here in the testing, oh, we did something wrong here in the planning phase, which is interesting. You plan everything in the beginning, even though you know that you know the least right now. But as you go through all of those steps, you learn. And the value, we talked about that, and the risk is the opposite of value. Now, if you do it that way, you have your product backlog, you look, find out what's the most important thing to do first. You would implement that. Sprint beginning, sprint planning, review. The shape is still the same, but the frequency goes up. Let's say if a sprint of 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, there's the next version of the product. The ability to change, and this is nothing, has nothing to do with Scrum, because Scrum is technology agnostic. But if you have good internal capabilities, technical capabilities built up, that's how you could operate. You can pretty much change anything, anytime without, oh, never watch a running tool. Value, we have this curve, and this is also really a good tool to mitigate risk. tackle your feature risk, tackle your technical risks, and early on, because if they materialize, you can still ask yourselves, do we still want to pursue it here? Do we want to pull out? And by doing this, by working kind of iterative, incremental, moving on the green line here, all of those 10 problems we had before, hey, they disappear. Isn't it beautiful? So engage and collaborate with your stakeholders, especially your users, again and again and again. Build up the capabilities to release frequently and be willing to learn and fail fast. We often talk about failure culture. We have to actually do what we are often talking about. Now let's look into validation. So at Scrum.org, we came up with something called evidence-based management. Basically, it has a correlation to evidence-based medicine, because before a procedure or medication is being put to the market, it has to prove that it helps. Now, every day, so many decisions are being done. And there's nothing wrong with that. Why shouldn't we ask ourselves, why have we made this decision? How would we know that this was a good decision? How could we have the evidence that it was a good decision? And we have, I don't want to go through all these areas here too much in detail, and I'm just checking my watch. I think I have to speed up a little bit. But anyway, we have current value. How are you currently perceived in the market? How are your customers currently talking about you? Are they satisfied or they aren't? How happy are your employees? What's your company culture? Maybe things like that. Then also think about the ability to innovate. How innovative can we actually be? Or do we lose on the edge of innovation because we are just being slowed down by all the legacy we have built up? Or maybe all the internal processes with so many people meeting and everything has to be through a board and they meet once a quarter and things like that. And also time to market. Let's say you have the best idea ever. How long would it take until the customer has it in their hands? Are we talking minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years? And all of the time spans I mentioned are possible these days. Now, the ones who are on the shorter side, they have a clear advantage over the ones who don't, who can't. Unrealized value is a little bit like forward-looking. Here, this is where we are right now. What are the things we could do as a new product, new features? Where's value unrealized yet? The name tells you about it. You can also think about, hey, if we do this or do we that, and maybe you come up with, maybe we should look into this. Maybe that's kind of a new cutting edge technology. If we would understand that, we could leverage for this and this and this and be successful. So the unrealized value and current value have a clear market focus, whereas ability to innovate, time to market, a lot to do with the organizational capabilities you have built up. And this has a lot to do with disruption again, because now you're able, if you have really this, well done, you are able to disrupt the other ones because you are enabled at that point. But the other thing which is important here is, and this is something I really like from the book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution. So maybe if you still have lockdown or something like that, this is something you want to read. There's the separation between leading measures and lagging measures. And for me, a way I like to talk about that is you cannot lose weight. This is not an activity you can do. But maybe my doctor told me you have to lose weight. Otherwise, you're at a serious risk of getting this. Now, let's say I have a good understanding, good purpose. I want to follow it. But again, I can't lose weight because it's not an activity I can do. I can eat less. Or I can exercise more or something else. And this is where this comes in, because lagging means, for example, well, in a month, I want to lose 5 kilograms. Now, if I have lost 5 kilograms by the end of the month, I have the lagging evidence. My leading approach was correct. So maybe every day I tell myself 2,000 calories, that's it. But maybe I say, I like to eat. I still eat, but I exercise more. So there could be different tactics for the same strategical lagging outcome. You might even combine them. So essentially, this is And the underlying problem I want to point out here is that the most of the measurements I see in enterprises are lagging by definition because they are strategic, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's really, really, really important. But you can only measure them once a year, once every half a year, or maybe once a quarter, maybe even once a month. But even if it's once a month, what do you do the remaining 29 days? What can you look at and to see whether you're doing right or wrong? And that's where the leading measures comes in. And again, this is something where you might even look at stuff like, do we have, how often do we run our tests? How much is our test coverage, and so on. And most of these things on its own, they might not mean a lot, but the aggregation of all of those measurements, and if you had a good intuition, they will lead to the lagging strategic measurement. And if it doesn't happen, at least you would have the proof that your assumption was wrong in your measurements, and then you can think about that and try to improve on it. Again, this is where inspection and adaptation would take place. So again, apply EBM based on 40X. That's kind of my other takeaway for you. Works really, really well. So vision, value, validation, the 3 V's. Well, and that's me. That's me again. My book, it got translated into Chinese, also Polish now, and also put some papers into this 97 things every Scrum practitioner should know, which was created by Gunther Werheim.
Why not Hebrew?
Sorry, can you come again?
Why not Hebrew?
I don't know if some of you volunteers to do that. I could reach out to Pearson.
Send us to us through Michal.
It's a great, I have to recommend the book. I read it and I have it, and it's wonderful. And thank you so much for joining us, Ralph. Do we have some more time for questions?
You decide. I'm here. I'm good. Also, I'm happy to answer questions.
2 minutes. I tried to read one of your book, but it looks like Chinese to me. No, just kidding. Michal, can you arrange it? We can work on the translation.
I have read it in English, and we can try to do that.
Okay.
We'll talk.
Any questions, or I eager to ask one question, but I can hold it. But if anyone has a question about product owner, it will be great. Okay.
Okay.
Hello.
Good.
I think someone is.
Yeah. Good evening.
Hello. I can hardly hear you. Can you maybe amp up your voice or speak louder?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Shoot.
Let's give it a try.
Can you hear me now?
Now it's better. Yeah.
Okay. Good evening. This is Alberto from Nigeria, Africa.
Okay.
So thanks for the amazing delivery. Please, I want to ask, with respect to the new Scrum guide, okay, could you share some light with respect to product vision?
So the word vision has disappeared in the Scrum guide, and it's not being replaced, but now we have this idea of a product goal. And the way you can think of, so essentially, I think the new Scrum guide is brilliant because it's really cleaned up. It's now 12 pages only, if you look at the content. And essentially, the increment has the commitment of the definition of done, because before definition of done was really important. It wasn't really part of Scrum itself. So it got nicely tied in. The commitment of the sprint is the sprint goal. And the commitment behind the product backlog is the product goal. So you can think about it, you can say, well, this is, if you look at, let's say, the risk you have or the strategy, how far you want to look out there. This is where your vision is. We want to fix that. Down here somewhere, you got move much more towards tactical. So your vision is here, your tactical, let's say, work or sprint goal would be here. So the product goal is somewhere in between. It could be something maybe you want to achieve in 2 months, maybe something you want to achieve in 6 months. So the product goal can vary a little bit on how tactical or strategical it should be. And let me see if I have. Anyway, so there's a blog coming out soon because I'm there's so many goals we have right now. I call it I don't know. I think it's something like product goals demystified or something like that. So I probably like this word demystified, but it talks about that a lot.
Okay, so we have to stop right now.
Okay.
I also, or again, wants to thank you and invite you all to the after party session.